and move forward with regarding our various departments. So I won't be taking the lead this evening. I'll be handing it over to our city manager, Terrence Moore, and Adam Saslow, who has worked with us from Kearns West, who is also a College Park resident, who has been working with not only the city, but our department heads as well. So take it away, gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I appreciate everyone's attendance this evening, in addition to the public who's taken on a keen interest in this regard. So at the behest of the Office of the City Manager, our facilitator, Mr. Adam Sesla, was able to provide a working agenda, if you will, about 2 days ago, Monday evening, just before 6 o'clock. And essentially what we hope to accomplish over the next 2 hours or so is a recap of the process, as well as a follow-up review of performance standards, interdependencies, and cooperation involving various departments, performance standards, interdependence, and cooperation, to facilitate a final discussion in that regard. And from there, we will adjourn. Initially, we hope to have an opportunity for Mayor and City Council to specifically authorize this evening a series of goals, objectives, and priorities as the initial function of the strategic planning process. However, over the last day or so, myself, along with Adam Saslow, in addition to individual discussions with department directors, necessitates some additional tweaks that need to be made available for everyone involved. So with that, I think we'll have a productive dialogue this evening. Likewise, Adam, based on the discussion you and I had about 3 hours ago, after this dialogue, I anticipate us being able to have one final discussion with department directors to tweak some specifics in that regard, followed by a possible regular workshop meeting or regular meeting presentation of recommended goals, objectives, and priorities to be adopted by City Council soon. So Adam Saslow, I'd like to ask you to please endorse the summary I just provided, as well as to continue to facilitate the process over the next 2 hours or so. Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Saslow, facilitator extraordinaire and College Park resident.
Oh, darn. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, I was on mute while I was having a snack. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moore and Madam Mayor. Yes, Mr. Moore, that was an accurate recap. Before I go any further, forgive me for the informality throughout the evening, as I that'll be the last time I refer to the city manager as Mr. Moore and probably the mayor as Madam Mayor. I am so bad about that. Do not take that as any sign of any less gravitas in this process. Take it more of a sign as my comfort with each of you, having worked with you now for nearly 6 months. Let me briefly recap the road we've traveled to get here. I think we began this process in February of 2020 with an initial conversation or two anticipating that we would meet in a department-wide executive level retreat sometime in the middle of March. The advent of COVID-19 kind of got in the way of those plans, and we quickly pivoted such that not only did this become a conversation about a strategic plan and how to feed into it as individual departments and as a collective, but it became a series of conversations that led to the development of a rather thick report which contains performance standards. Through interviews and informal conversations, it became apparent that as a city, we were not holding ourselves up to measurable outcomes that fed into the existing strategic plan. And so with all people concerned, we went down the pathway of developing individual department performance standards. We broke the collective of departments into what we refer to as pods, groups of 4 and 5 individuals, so that those department heads could see how their own performance standards were interdependent with activities that would help others achieve their own performance standards. together over several conversations, we were able to compile this report that we'll be looking at more closely tonight. This report was issued back on April 28th in a meeting just like this. By that time, we were all in a virtual environment, protective of each other's health and the operations of the city. The council and mayor and city manager discussed the content of what was then a 35 or 36 page paper and offered commentary on its contents. I edited lightly, and instructions were given to the department heads to review accordingly and make modifications consistent with the feedback that was received. The document that you have been sent changed a little bit, but not much, and was reissued under a cover of dating May 6th, 2020. That is the document that we will be working with tonight, with two minor changes. The city engineer offered a few changes, as did the department head for public works, Mike Mason. I'll relate those changes to you shortly. Tonight, what are we going to do? The agenda that you were sent the other day did suggest that we would do a quick recap, as we've done now, and then talk about the performance standards, interdependencies, and cooperation, a review of any of the modifications that were made in recent weeks. It said that we would then discuss how we would evaluate performance in an extended COVID-19 environment. That is how the agenda reads at this moment. That is actually going to be the focal point of today's conversation. What I'd like to do is not necessarily evaluate the content line by line that we did back in April, but rather I'd like to focus on whether or not that content now applies in an extended COVID-19 environment. And so line by line, what I intend to do is highlight those standards that need additional work given where we are today, and then suggest that the city manager lead a process, or at least define a process by which department heads can go back and maybe reevaluate those standards given where we are today. Here's the reason. We've said that those standards will be used in performance evaluations after 2021. We are now in that new fiscal year as of 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ago. And if we were to stop right now, I actually think that the performance standards that we've crafted are a bit unfair. It's an entirely different world. So there is more work to be done. I'll look to you, Terrence, at the end of today's session to define that process, or at least set the expectations that you have for everybody to review where we are. Let me stop for a moment. That was a whole lot of talking, more than I ever intended to do. Are there any questions? Okay, hearing none. Let me see. Is it possible for me to control screen? Michael, I'm sure I can. Yes.
Michael is.
Mike, are you there? You're there, but
Mike,
on mute.
unmute your mic.
I was on mute. Adam, yes, you can share.
Okay. Bring up performance standards. There we go. Move that over there. And all right, for those reviewing, this is the cover that we've used before. It should look very familiar, now dated as July 29. Table of contents reflects what is in the document. And in those first pages are the pods that I talked about earlier. That represents the order in which we will be looking at each of the performance standards. Gerald's here. I'm sure he may have some color to add to his performance standards, and several of the department heads are here as well, and we'll certainly open up the floor to them to talk about what they've written. As I said, we'll start with Gerald, and what I intend to do is walk through this document. I will highlight, I'm just taking this as an example, I'll highlight in yellow those areas that in this case Gerald needs to go back and address. Many of the standards may still apply, and what I'd ask Gerald to do, if it were up to me, is to recraft this particular standard in the second column in a next iteration, if that's where council and mayor decide to go. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, I'm hoping that the council and mayor have reviewed this, or at least taken a good look, or can react on the fly as we go through this. Let me remind you, the last time we did this, it turned into, for technological and other reasons, nearly a 4-hour event. I'm not sure that any of us is prepared to sit here for 4 hours. So let's be focused, understand that you have seen this before, unless I call out any particular changes. And it may be enough to just say in standard 1 for Gerald, hey, you need to go back and review it, and then move along to standard 2, 3, 4, and so on.
Adam, hey, this is my case question. Terrence, did you see my chat?
Michael, of course. So ultimately, as I stated during my introductory comments, Michael, the purpose of this exercise is to have one additional follow-up review to enable mayor and city council to outline goals, objectives, and priorities beyond this meeting. That is to be adopted at an upcoming city council meeting. So tonight's exercise is to help us get to that place by executing the building blocks that both Adam and I discussed during introductory comments. So I think we're on our way, Michael. So please allow Adam to continue the process, and we will be able to outline specific additional direction at an upcoming executive team meeting. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we close this evening. Adam, please continue.
Yep. So again, it is enough to highlight major concerns that you have with a given standard or the content that follows, or just to say, go back and rewrite based on a COVID-19 environment. One further note, on our previous calls, we did have a note taker from my staff, and it's an intern, but we did have a note taker. We do not have that tonight, so I'll be editing on the fly. There will be no meeting summary produced out of this, just a document that's been annotated. Good.
Adam, I have one question.
Yes.
I had sent you an email if you could identify the areas that have changed. Apparently, you're going to do that on the fly tonight. But my question is the document that you're putting on the screen now what you sent us a couple days ago, basically? I know you've added a column there, but is it otherwise the same?
In fact, that column was already there.
Oh, yeah, that column is already there. Okay.
Yep. So there were some minor language changes that I did not view as substantive. Mike Mason had removed the last 2 rows of his set of performance standards, row 5 and 6. And then the city engineer added some language. We'll go over her performance standards in greater detail. For the life of me, I could not quickly do a compare and contrast document between the April 28th version and the May 6th version. But honestly, I don't remember anything particularly substantive coming across in that 2-week period.
Okay, well, you're gonna point out the differences now, I guess.
I'll do the best I can. There's been a fair amount of intervening time, and I apologize for that. It's just the way the process has unfolded. I don't think any of us expected to be here much past April 1st. Okay, going to Gerald's and moving through this as quickly as we can. We initially said that he was going to review levels of contractor support and expand the City of College Park's footprint of social media techniques and uses across at least 3 media outlets. Do you see any need to change that performance standard in a COVID-19 world?
I think there's more of a need for it now, especially just how people are getting information. But just generally speaking, I'd be interested to hear from the department heads themselves about what they think should be, if there should be any differences based upon where they were.
I agree. I'd like to hear an honest answer from them, just, where they stand and how they feel about each one of these. Yeah.
I don't know that we'll be able to do that across the board. We don't have everybody here, but Gerald, you're up. Lead the way.
Mr. City Manager, is this really what we were asking to do today? Because I thought we were not necessarily going to be required to have response at this moment. So I don't want to overstep, but I was just actually here to make sure that the broadcast went out.
So as I discussed during the last executive team meeting in this regard, the primary purpose of this exercise was for the facilitator, mayor, and city council, city manager to engage a review process so that we can ultimately come up with goals, objectives, and priorities, as I talked about earlier, as well as during that meeting. However, given the interest expressed by the board members, mayor, and city council to offer that feedback, please feel free. But quite frankly, if I may, the best way to answer it globally, mayor and council, is that during our previous executive team meetings leading up to this point, all the information that is being presented here was endorsed by the department directors. So if there are any other specific questions above and beyond that you may have, of course, the department director like you, Gerald, is at liberty to respond. So essentially, if I may, essentially what's being presented this evening was vetted by the department directors post our previous exercises and visits. However, if there's some interest to explore further, that's fine as well. But again, we've completed that process at that level.
Hey, Terrence, this is Mike Hicks here. The only problem with that is the department heads are not here because tonight was not their focus. So if Adam is going through these goals, there's only 2 or 3 department heads that are here.
There's more than that are here. And again, department directors were invited to be here, but again, I just clarified that so we're all set. So on that note, again, the primary response is that department directors completed the process, and that is a big reason why we're here. However, if there are any intimate questions of council members or the mayor, they are at liberty to ask them for those who are available to respond.
Well, I have a question in that regard then on standard number 2. With regard to other needed conditions, it said, Gerald, you said a need-based approach to marketing. And so my question is, well, what other viable approach is there? I mean, and who decides what is needed? I'm not disagreeing with it. I just don't understand what you're trying to emphasize there as opposed to what else?
Well, Councilman Clay, I think what I was attempting to communicate at that point is, in many cases, there are marketing issues that come up out of the blue. So need-based is more about, do we have the ability to respond when different aspects come up, different needs, different creative issues. For example, we were just talking about the AT&T connectivity with some of the neighborhoods that may not be able to afford internet. This is a great need, especially when many schools are going back to not coming in class with the students. So if we had a way to maybe get that word out, or marketing, different aspects. I know that was probably not the greatest example, but I'm actually trying to go back over this script here. But bottom line is need-based, things come up in many cases.
Okay. So you're talking, I get the picture now. You're talking about being quick to respond to changing needs.
Right, correct.
Okay, I got it.
You know,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, it went kind of long, but yes, sir, that's it.
Gerald, since you're here, and I
Yeah.
appreciate you being here, looking at your standards and looking at the 6 standards you crafted several months ago, do any of them need to change in this sort of deeply entrenched COVID environment?
Thank you, Adam. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm gonna try to look at them real quick and see. But the one thing that I would probably go back on or continue to maybe request is, I know we're in a difficult situation, but we could sure use a replacement staff for the person that is no longer here. That's one of the first things that comes to mind for me. Anything else that I might be able to address?
I do have a question.
Yes.
And it's one of the things that we talked about, and I have a feeling it's going to be coming up a number of times this evening, and it should be something that we continue to look at. But before I became part of the organization, being in the organization in these conversations, I keep on hearing that we work in silos. What you do is integral to so much of what we do as a city, whether it's communicating with our internal stakeholders, our external stakeholders, or both.
Yes.
How do we, in your view, from a strategic perspective, ensure that those sort of backbone departments, and I would put IT in this as well, and I'm definitely missing others because the two of you specifically are involved in almost everything that we do, should be, but you're not necessarily on that first line of consideration. So how do we as an organization make that happen? How do we integrate the people that we need from the get-go instead of pulling folks in at the end?
Gosh, this is a philosophical point of view here, but I think we've got to understand that our internal and external vision, or not vision, I will start with external. Let me start there. Our external image is something that we have to deal with every day. And in order to do that, we have to understand how urgent it is to respond when we've got certain things that are maybe showing negative on us, when we got instant issues like, say, the fire at the chemical plant last week. I'm still responding to the media down Roosevelt Highway saying I'm in College Park and things of that nature. But and I even took a call. One of the council persons submitted to me some information about new information on the web that's more like clickbait, that's talking about College Park being one of the more dangerous cities. I've been dealing with that kind of stuff for 10 years. But I do think that it is still my responsibility to respond to that stuff. But I feel like once we get a little bit more foundation, that we can begin to have a offensive marketing approach instead of being defensive, being reactive. We can begin to be proactive. And I think that's something that we haven't seen, because in this position, even before I got here, we've always been Okay, something happened. Okay, how bad is it getting? How bad is it getting? Okay, now we're going to go downstairs and talk to the PIO. I believe that this city is so advanced that we've got to market ourselves and tell our own story before someone else tells our story. So I do believe that internal marketing is something, the chain of information, all of that stuff is important. And I'll just say this and then I'll be quiet. My issue, as I have returned from having some time off and come back, I believe it is important to highlight every department and lift them up and market them and show them off and extol all the beautiful, wonderful, positive virtues. And I just want to make sure that we have a organized approach to doing that and doing it on a consistent basis to where it becomes the status quo. But I know we have a lot of work to do. So again, pardon me, but that's.
Gerald?
So my question is, how do we do it? How do we make sure that we are integrating these core departments in, like, for instance, our response to some of the challenges with COVID-19 and people working from home? That's got to be, IT's got to be intricately involved in that from the get-go. How do we make sure that we are including all of the people that need to be included in particular situations, projects from the start? Because I think that's a real failing for us right now. And I'd love to hear what Mr. Moore has to say about it and how he would approach it. But that to me is one of the, I think in working in these pods, they were loosely connected in that people who would be working together kind of were grouped together, but we don't have a culture of this. We don't have a framework for it. That is one thing that I think is integral as we move forward.
Yes.
So again, in our collective efforts as an executive team, meeting as frequently as we do, visiting as we frequently do, incorporating Michael's role as not Director of Information Technology, but as a Chief Information Officer, there is a distinction between the two titles. As Chief Information Officer, he works closely with everyone involved, all department directors, including the Office of the City Manager, to outline and determine what needs and capacities are required in order for the City of College Park to be nimble enough, even though many of the employees having to work from home, incorporating information technology, software, hardware, other equipment, etc. So I think we've had some solid productivity in that regard over the last few months, Madam Mayor, council members, in which we've been able to be responsive in that regard and create an environment in which people can actually be productive while being at home during the critical time as noted. So on that note, Michael, if I can briefly ask you to talk a little bit about some specific experiences to shed light on some productive outcomes we've had in that regard and how we will continue to move forward productively, I think that would be helpful in terms of responding to the inquiry.
Sure.
Let me just ask, can I ask one question real quick? I just wanted to ask, I understand Mr. Walker and the need to be proactive. I think we need to be very, very proactive rather than being reactive to situations and what's going on. Do you think that one person would make the difference in being proactive versus reactive, or is there one or two things that would make the difference? And we're not talking, again, like Terrence said, you are you're working for all the departments. So will that enable you to be proactive, not just for the city, but for all the departments as well?
I do believe, and quite honestly, I've been looking at this position, the position that we previously had. And of course, you all know that the department was sort of dealing with some leadership that was maybe temporary and might not have been definitive in exactly what the staffing needs were. I've looked this thing over for the last 6 months. I do believe that since we are now in not just this COVID situation, but I do believe for quite some time, we've always needed something more from a strategic communications position. And if I was looking at the new position, I would suggest that it's a strategic communicator, someone that is going to be more instantaneous with things like your social media, things like your website, any kind of electronic communications. I think that if we put an emphasis on that every day for the 8-hour, 16-hour, 24-hour period, if we put someone in that position that is dealing with strategic communications, I think we will begin to do a lot of what we've been talking about, which is being more strategic, more projected into the future, a little less reactive and more proactive. So I do believe with the right markup for what that job duty is, I think a strategic communicator is someone who can come in and make a difference.
Okay, can I respond now?
Hicks, please.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, I think to get to the meat of the question that you asked, I do agree that we've been working in silos here to try and get our hands around this whole paradigm shift that COVID has brought us to. The police didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what the fire department was doing. Mercedes didn't know what technology was doing. I think we need someone like an emergency manager, someone that can pull us all together. We can put together some strategic goals and objectives, some policies and procedures. So in the future, Gerald is in the room, Mike Hicks is in the room, Mercedes Fallout Shelter at GICC is in the room, Althea is in the room talking about how much money we can spend for these emergencies. I think someone like an emergency manager can pull us all together so that no critical department is left out.
Michael, I'd like to pivot for a second. I'd like to talk a little bit about what we've been able to accomplish above and beyond those future considerations. In other words,
Mr. Moore, I'm gonna interject because I think that that's a really good point, and I don't want to lose it because one of the things that I was saying I was talking with the mayor of East Point a couple of days ago, and we were talking about someone we knew who had COVID, and COVID attacks the weaknesses in a body. And I think this pandemic has attacked the weaknesses in systems. And I think that we have to acknowledge that we have weaknesses in the systems if we are going to get to a point where we are better moving forward. I understand what we've done. I understand how we've reacted. It has not been as optimal as all of us would have hoped. And we got to own that. And that's okay, but we've got to be better moving forward. So if an emergency manager is what we need, if we need a project manager, because we're going to talk about how we don't do projects together, that's one of the things on my list, certainly, we need to acknowledge them. Let's not sweep it under the rug.
So an observation.
Let me
Hold
say a
on,
couple
everybody.
things.
Wait. No. It's my floor. My floor. I get to do this. This is really, really good. And there are some systemic issues which obviously need to be addressed. We need to decide if this is about performance standards, and it may or may not be, or if this is about the systemic issues, because otherwise it's going to be 6:40 a.m. before we leave here, not sometime in the next couple of hours. I think personally, you need to have these conversations. This is the big stuff. This is the important stuff. The standards can come after, but we've got to get our house in order. I'm going to kick this back and recognize both the mayor and the city manager to decide where we go from here, with no disrespect to council, of course.
I've said I think we need to talk about some of the systemic issues. I think that's going to be a better use of our time, but I will yield to my colleagues on that.
I agree with you. I think there's too many little issues, and in the strategic plan that, you know, maybe we hate to say we push it off, but we put it on a back burner a little bit while we take care of some other issues that we need to take care of.
I would agree. I think we need to address system issues as well as systemic issues. In talking about project management, this is something I think I've talked to the mayor about. We've talked about, Michael and I have talked about it. Managing projects across the organization. The structural issue I think that needs to be addressed is a matrix. In industry, we have matrix organizations that pull things across silos. We work very effectively as individual departments. What we don't do as effectively when something changes is communicate between the departments and pull together on a project basis or an emergency basis or a marketing basis. That's what we've heard so far. We've heard project, we've heard marketing, and we've had emergency. And we have to look at how you structure that as an organization to cut across the silos, and how you appoint, for example, a particular department director to be the project manager or marketing manager or emergency manager across, or his designee or her designee across the organization. And that's a structure that we don't have. We don't have a project management structure, as I've said many times, but we don't have a cross-organizational structure to tie stuff together. And I think that's part of what everybody's saying today.
If I may, Council, Mayor and Council, it was my understanding of this meeting, we wanted to find out, as we're going down this road now, what are your goals? What do you want to see? And then we can take them back and put them into our strategic plan. We kind of went over where every department is, but we want to know, like this, do we need an emergency person? Do we need a project person? So we're trying to get what your goals are for the department so we could take it back and incorporate it into what we're doing.
And I think that, Mercedes, I think very well said. I think that overreaching goal is to have things that cut across departments that address issues that are organization-wide and require the coordination between and among departments to make them work out effectively. And it can be proactively, it can be reactive. Emerging management coordinator can be both proactive and reactive.
I think they have to be both.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's an agreed upon need. The question is how. We're saying we want this. We see this as a need. I've heard this from department heads that we're not meeting these goals in action. How do we get there?
There are experts that you can bring in that can advise on how you structure an organization.
To that effect. So as far as the question regarding how, I mean, there are a couple of different ways to go about it. Councilman Clay, you just talked about the utilization of external experts to help create that environment. And again, a number of us already have backgrounds and abilities to help facilitate that outcome. But given that is, and that's part of what we're hoping to accomplish, goals and objectives, priorities coming down the pipe from mayor and city council. This particular discussion, this particular dialogue is a reflection of goals, objectives, and priorities coming down from the pipe from city council. So on that note, Adam Saslow, as you are taking copious notes and incorporating this into this big discussion outline you're in the process of writing, that essentially provides an opportunity for mayor and city council to do exactly just that. So you have at the last statement of the document you're writing at this time, city council goals. So that coupled with the previous information having been assembled, I like to utilize that as a productive way to get there so that we can also help define how we'll get there. And quite frankly, we would have to come back with specific recommendations as to how, because obviously we have to be concerned financially relative to what expenses or additional expenses or shift in budgeted resources in order to get to that place. So those are some thoughts that would have to be taken under consideration as soon as possible to be brought back as we engage the executive team to help move forward in that regard. So very well. So I'll take that as productive dialogue and direction.
So when can we expect something?
So what I was hoping to accomplish at the conclusion of this exercise was a follow-up visit with Adam Saslow. I look forward to an executive team meeting dialogue to this effect during the August 5th meeting to enable us to come back with some specific considerations within the next few weeks. So that would be when, Mayor?
First meeting in September?
Sure, let's make a commitment for the first meeting in September. That would be Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. So the workshop meeting agenda item, Tuesday, September 8th, 2020, one day after Labor Day. That's why it's not Monday, it's Tuesday because of Labor Day. Will be specific recommendations, guidance, outcomes associated with these council goals as talked about at this meeting. Because again, during the executive team meeting of August 5th, next Wednesday, 1 week from today, we'll be able to start the process of outlining specific considerations to be brought back at that time. Yes, ma'am.
Now, I mean, to be fair, I don't expect everything to be solved by then, but
No.
but I think we should be on a road to answering that question of how
That's
we are
exactly
going to.
what I'm getting at, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. That's precisely correct.
This is where I'm going to move into from the realm of, oh my gosh, Adam, you've done a great job. We love having you aboard, to the, can you leave? and why are we kicking this can down the road 6 weeks? We have an hour and 15 minutes right now by schedule, and goodness knows we've gone beyond that in the past. I'm going to be very bold here. My apologies in advance. You've got time. You have the magic wand. You know, you can say, this is what I really want. Why don't we have that discussion now?
All right, let's do it.
If I may, ladies and gentlemen, I did not mean to suggest otherwise. We are having this discussion now. I'm simply looking to integrate the department directors at the next executive team meeting so that we can formulate considerations as to how we would get there. It's a living, breathing, moving process.
Yep.
And I just outlined the linear time frame in order to begin that or to continue that process.
So let's roll up our sleeves and do it. Okay.
All right.
So if you could reorganize the 15, 16 departments in a way that created less siloing, more cooperation, would you break them down, pull them together, create an institution, by which somebody along the way, maybe it was me, said, IT and comms need to have that monthly structure to work with other department heads to identify needs, to get out in front of problems. I don't know, maybe that structure exists right now. Maybe each city councilman needs to head one of these matrix types of organizations, and be responsible for intergovernmental communications. I don't know, make it up. Paint the picture.
Well, let me offer a suggestion. Look at the slices that we need to make across the silos, the planes, if you will. Visualize the silos sticking up through a plane, and you've got planes cutting through those silos, tying them together. What are the planes that need to be tied together? We've already said one of them being response to emergencies. We've talked about the need to coordinate everybody in responding to marketing needs of carrying the city forward. So what are the things? I'll throw out another one. Financial integration, the flow of financial planning across the organization, for example. We could identify zillions of planes, but to keep it simple, identify maybe 6 or 8 or 10 flows
I think land
or,
use has to be one of them.
pardon,
Land use.
land use. Good.
Or maybe more excuse me, it's Michelle. Maybe more broadly, the development process, because it touches development, engineering, public planning, zoning, building permits. They need to
Okay.
function as a unit.
We got another one. And we can take these after we get these planes, just as you did, Michelle. You took something that might be a subplane, if you will, and you said, well, wait a minute, that's part of a bigger plane. But once we get these identified, we don't have to spend a huge amount of time refining them now. Just identify the ones that we think need to be tied across the organization process-wise. And then we can separately, groups of us or the staff can work on it and sort these out into a few meaningful planes.
Got you on 6 so far. Communication, information technology, public safety, municipal finance and planning, commerce, development, and land use.
Okay, that's almost sound like 6.
Yep, it's not that hard. Let's knock it out. So then which teams need which department heads need to be on each team? Here's your matrix.
Problem is we don't have clones of Mr. Hicks and Mr. Walker. I think they almost need to be everywhere, because there is information that has to be disseminated
in each place,
in every place. So how we're doing that relies on both of those departments.
Okay. I'm going to continue to make myself the hated facilitator. Each of these folks has more than one person in the departments.
No, yeah. Well, I mean, communications has 2. So, which, you know, we heard about earlier, needs to change, but that, yeah. Can we put, I'm jumping around a little bit here and I apologize for that, but before I forget, and I don't know where this goes because it's sort of everything. The integration of online capabilities. I think that's one thing that has really shown itself to be a weakness during the pandemic for us, is that the ability to continue to conduct business despite the closure of City Hall and such. And so that should be, as we are moving toward ensuring that people are engaged with us and understand what's coming out of the city, et cetera, like we have to be able to provide more services online. It's just the way that people are digesting things.
No question.
Well, we're actually a lot better off than we were 3 or 4 years ago. I can certainly say that. And some of the things we have in works right now will quickly position us there.
Yeah, I'm excited about the meetings next week. I'm not saying that we're stuck in the mud, but we still need to move aggressively forward on that.
Absolutely.
Well, what are some of the things that cross the silos, like Ambrose says, of the 6 things? What are some of the common threads that are used throughout all of these that you can tie together? Are there any things there?
Not sure what you're asking, sir.
Well, there's procurement process, for example.
I'm thinking, when you get into we're talking about communications and getting together and awareness of what's going on, making sure that the departments are working together. What's that one thread that's going to tie those together? Is there a common thing that's going to tie everything together so everybody is working together, the information is getting out there? Is there one piece that needs to be in there more than another?
I mean, I think we just need policy surrounding that, do we not? I mean, I don't think that we have the policies to integrate people now. Is that a
No.
fair statement?
No, I just, there's
Well,
some common.
it depends what you mean by integrate.
Yeah, that's where I was gonna go.
If you want, someone made the comment earlier about, well, does everybody know everything that's going on? I mean, Michael has put in place various tools. For example, the tool that you can see your goals and see how you're progressing, and everybody can see everybody's goals if they look. That's one way of knowing what's going on in the organization. We already have an external website. You could have an internal website that is for departments to exchange real detailed information. That's something that's not that hard to put together. There's a transaction management system that is frequently used, and Michael and I have talked about that ties organization together, that take the paper flow that used to be from in-basket to in-basket to in-basket and makes it all electronic, and everybody communicates and can see where something is stuck in the queue, is not moving. That's a mechanism that facilitates a lot of different things, whether it be a marketing ad campaign or an invoice or a notification about a new emergency procedure. How you disseminate that and make sure that everybody has seen it in the organization. That's a technical tool that can be used to do that. But you first need to decide what are those things that need to be communicated. And the information that flows in the plane that is necessary to tie everybody in the plane together between organizations.
But it could go out there, it could be out there, and everybody have access to it. But if people don't get into it and they don't use it, then somebody says, well, hey, so-and-so's doing this over here in their department. Oh, I didn't know anything about that.
Exactly.
We need to impress upon them the importance of finding out what's going on. If it's a 15-minute meeting every day, just to kind of go over things that are happening to make sure everybody's aware, something. Because my experience, you tell them and later on they say, oh gosh, I didn't know that. And you say, well, it's online, it's put out every day. Well, I get to that maybe once or twice a week.
Right. Online bulletin boards, display boards, my experience has been in industry, they just don't work by themselves. You need, in a computer system, it's interrupted scanning. You're looking for people to scan the bulletin board. Is everybody going to scan the bulletin board? No, sometimes you need to knock on their door effectively. You can do that with an email. You can do it with a pop-up on their screen. There are a lot of different ways, but you need a combination of having a place where people can go look for information versus where the information comes knocking on their door and says, hey, you need to respond to this.
Well, and I think the emphasis, in my opinion, has to come from the mayor and council first, and through the city manager. You are going to do this. You are going to look at this. You need to be aware of what's going on in the other departments and put that focus out there.
Well,
I'm going to push back on that. And Mercedes, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Now, years ago, before they started using computers, we used to read each other. Everybody used to get everybody's month in. So that was a way of keeping up with what was going on in the other departments. But we have in place the quadrant workplace. And if we made it mandatory and we use it the way that we're supposed to use it, then that's where you can go and find out what's going on. And you can always tag another department head who needs to be involved in it, where they have to follow up because you have tagged them in Quantum Workplace. So if we take out having to copies and send the month in, we load that month in up on Quantum Workplace. That's where you find out what everybody has going on. And we can't keep giving people an option. This is where you put it, and this is where we find out the information.
How well is the system being used now?
I don't think that the system is being used to its capacity. I think it's a very good system, and it keeps you updated on what's going on and where you put it. But we have to get back to everybody turning in, even if it's one page, everybody needs to turn in the month in. What did you do this month? So that everybody else will know what you do. Because now we don't get the month ends of other departments, so we don't really know what's going on in other people's departments.
So we began emphasizing the importance of executing and implementing the Quantum Workplace software over the last several months. Really, at the beginning of this year, January 2020, February 2020, we've engaged a significant push to offer that direction and offer those expectations. We've had a couple executive team meeting discussions and directions about that. So that's fairly evolving. It's a good system. So some departments utilize it better than others, to the point that Mercedes made. So part of our goal is to have all departments utilizing this package on a consistent and frequent basis.
What percentage of departments use it at this point?
Probably half.
And what are the barriers? Why aren't people using it?
Or what do they use what do they use in lieu of it? Or they just don't use anything and they don't know what's going on.
Let me ask this question. Terrence, are you using it?
Actually, no, I direct department directors to utilize it. So the Office of the City Manager's role and responsibility is to work with department directors to utilize it. So I don't think that's expected. So as far as, because it's department driven. So
if you're not using it, then why would you expect others to use it? I mean, if you're not integrating the system into your work, then why would others? I mean, why wouldn't people follow your lead?
Well, they are. So again, this is a department function. So each department is expected to utilize this function. We're moving in that direction as of 2020. So in terms of the Office of the City Manager utilizing this package, it's really being designed to direct those per department, because it's related to department outcomes, department specific goals, objectives, etc. That is why.
Terrence,
yes.
How do you, and this isn't really an intent to put you on the spot. It's simply a question. How do you know what the department directors are doing? Because you obviously are on top of what's going on in the organization.
I try my best, yes.
Yeah. So you're using some mechanism to do that, or mechanisms.
I am, and I'll tell you what that is.
To get back to the mayor's point, what mechanisms are you using in lieu of Quantum Workplace, and why? And that gets back to, what are the barriers for you? Is it just habit that you've been doing it that way, or that it's faster? So, okay, something's wrong with Quantum Workplace. It needs to be speeded up. You see where I'm going with it?
Exactly, if I may. So I'd like to again reiterate, Quantum Workplace is a fairly recent introduction to the City of College Park operations. So to answer Councilman Clay's question, monthly reporting documents. Each department director had been submitting monthly reports to the Office of the City Manager. So part of this transition involves department directors, in lieu of the previous monthly reporting format, transitioning that into the Quantum Workplace environment. So the Quantum Workplace environment is an avenue to more efficiently engage monthly reporting. That's the process that's the transition process we just initiated earlier this year. So it is an evolving function. So that is why department directors are expected by the Office of the City Manager to continue that flow, so that we'll have a more efficient way of reviewing outcomes and reporting as noted. So some departments have made that transition. continue to make that transition fairly well, while others are still working to get to that place. And that is the environment in which we're presently in. So simply put, instead of the monthly reporting documents submitted to the city manager, transition that into the quantum workplace environment. Again, we've had a recent executive team meeting discussion about how we continue to work to get to that place. And I think that's a fairly reasonable expectation.
I'm
And
going to
once
jump
that
in for,
happens-
hold on, everybody. Let me jump in for a quick second here. We may be overworking this a little bit. I have had the honor and blessing of having numerous conversations with the department heads, and every one of them is well intentioned. I would dare say almost, if not every one of them, is largely overburdened. We are short staffed in this city, and it's a big city with a lot on the plate. I might argue that for some, it is just another thing to have to get on to quantum. I would argue too that there is, every incentive to get their job responsibilities done. If the litter does not get picked up, if the police are not there in 4 minutes or less, and if a fire burns for more than a couple of minutes, there is a lot to pay. Quantum may not be the highest priority. Now, tie quantum to performance standards and to the HR system and compensation. Now you've got something. Maybe we need to think about everyone having some teaming standard, which spells out, you will submit monthly reports if that's what it is. Maybe it's a weekly report. Maybe we need to have a conversation amongst the department heads, which says, what are you able to do, and will it meet the need, and can we find a way to marry the two so that you can hit that target when your annual review comes along? But provide the incentive to make this almost as important as the things that they do to keep people like me happy in this city. Just a thought.
I think it's a good one. But is it a user-friendly system?
If I may, Madam Mayor, I consider it a user-friendly system. Again, I spent time with Michael Hicks as our Chief Information Officer to think about more efficient ways in which we can utilize a package to engage in more effective reporting, ease of communication in that regard. But again, it is a transition, it's a greater transition for some people. And of course, given the current state of affairs over the last few months, we've experienced some disruptions. So the mandatory direction regarding quantum workplace was initiated January, February at the dawn of the adverse impacts resulting from COVID-19. Again, that's not an excuse because again, we've since had discussions and directives to continue to transition into that process. So my request to everybody is to give administration an opportunity to continue that path because it's something we believe in. The Office of the City Manager personally supports this format in lieu of the previous arrangement of monthly reporting on a document basis. So with that, I think we're well underway, but it is a continuous process.
Oh dear. Somebody had
Good
something
stuff.
happen somewhere.
So
Either that or a very big dog.
Yeah.
what other systemic or structural issues beyond this sort of matrix and teaming and the breakdown of silos does City Council think it is imperative to address?
Well, I think we also have to not only communicate amongst our departments, but we also have to bridge the gap to our citizens. And one of the things we're implementing right now, right, the notification system, so that when you find a pothole, you can immediately send it in, it's been received, you can track it, you get a response, et cetera, et cetera. That's just one way that you integrate the citizens into the organization. Another is community policing. So I think we need to look at the boundary between the city staff and the citizenry. And that's another structure that needs to be addressed. And what are the mechanisms that we're using to bridge it? We've got a very good one right now, this Zoom meeting. I mean, there may be, I don't know how many people are out there. I haven't looked, but typically there are several hundred people that sit in on meetings that maybe we would have had 6 or 12 in council chambers if it was being discussed, or in the executive, if it's in the executive conference room, we might have had one. So, so people are having an opportunity to understand us trying to understand our problems. But we need to integrate them in all the ways that we need to communicate and work with the community. The secret to good policing, I think we heard the other night, or one secret at least, was to protect and serve the people and work with them so that they're your neighbor, they're your friend, they're the person you've seen 5 times this week. That's just one simple example. So that there are structural issues there, I'm sure, as well. People don't know that why their water meter hasn't worked for 3 months. Then they call me, and I dig the answer out for them. But there ought to be a better way, you know, to facilitate that.
I think someone mentioned HR a few minutes ago, but it's one of those core kind of backbone departments, and we have some growth opportunities in HR as well. Just being able to communicate with our employees, and you know, that again, that brings in communications and IT, but and the onboarding process.
Yes. Yes. Madam Mayor, could I jump in here?
I feel like I felt like for a second I was preaching and you said amen.
So Quantum Workplace is a very powerful tool. It has a survey module. It has onboarding. It has exiting processes within that software that we could use. And I have mentioned this to HR to take advantage of the survey module, the onboarding, the exiting process. All of these things are in Quantum that we could use. I purchased the software so that we could have better collaboration amongst all departments. I recently put all 4 of our strategic goals into Quantum so that when you put some information in Quantum, it has to tie back to our 4 strategic goals for the city. And of course, the city manager has access to look at all of that documentation.
Which I do. Getting back to the question in terms of the Office of the City Manager's utilization, it's really a review and monitoring process to ensure department directors are moving in the direction that we've initiated a few months ago. So Michael, I appreciate your commentary to that effect.
There's another dimension, perhaps a third dimension. We've talked 2 so far.
We're going 3D, huh?
Yeah, we're going 3D. If I go to 4,
I'm not using
it gets a little surreal.
Ambrose, I'm not using Airtable here. I'm using Zoom. It's a little more challenging. Next time, Airtable.
But I think there's a term that we used to use in industry, and I don't know whether it's used elsewhere or not, but we call it acculturation. And we have a fair amount of turnover. We've had particularly a fair amount of turnover in the police department, for example. And bringing people into the organization, the onboarding is a characteristic, or which I say, a dimension, maybe an attribute of acculturation. There's a whole bunch of things that make up an organization's culture. And one of the things that facilitates communication in an organization and working together is to have a similar culture, a similar expectation of knowing, tying together but with your fellows across the organization. And that is something that usually is championed by HR. And that I don't know, that goes through a different dimension, in a third dimension, if you will, in the organization.
We have
Whether there's another component of that third dimension, I'd have to think about. But that is certainly one. It's the air you breathe. It's the water you drink. It's the colors of the walls. It's the feeling that you get when you walk in the building.
Mm-hmm. Who are we? Who?
You betcha.
What have you, like, when you choose to have an employment relationship with the city of College Park, what does that mean? Why are we different? What gives our organization the character and that sense of place? You know, Mercedes said a lot in the community conversations, you know, College Park is a special place. And I agree. But we should be sharing that with people as soon as they hit the door, that this is a place that is different, and here's why, and this is what we expect from you as a result of that, and these are the standards by which we serve.
You get that when you go into, you know, places like Chick-fil-A.
Oh, I knew you were going to say Chick-fil-A. I knew you were.
Well, I was going to say Delta first, because I was part of the Delta family when I went on board, and you became part of that family. And I mean, you wanted to find out what goes on in all the departments, and you wanted to be a part of it, and you wanted to, you know, you just expressed that. You went in to write a check years ago, and they wouldn't even bother about asking you, you know, what bank, you know, they just would, okay, fine, you work at Delta, that's fine. You know, it's I don't know if it's an attitude, it's more of the people coming in believe in it, they learn it, they eat and breathe it every day, you know, about how good it is to work for Chick-fil-A. And when you walk in and you get those people, you know, my pleasure, you know, they know exactly what they're doing. So,
Councilman Allen, it's almost like we have to redefine our culture. And if we redefine our culture, then it goes out to the citizens, it goes to the employees. We have to have the same culture across the board. And I don't know that we have the same culture across the board.
Yeah, I don't know that we know what our culture is. I don't know if someone were to ask you, you know, what's your driving force in College Park? What are we about? I don't know. I think if you ask somebody in Chick-fil-A, I think they would know.
I guarantee
it's all about service. It's all about the customer. It's all about taking care of the customer. I'm not a member of Chick-fil-A, so I may have said it wrong, but.
But the fact that you have an idea of what, I mean, just as someone who hasn't been integrated into their culture, has a sense of what that culture is, says a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've tried to jot down a few ideas here on the acculturation dimension. Is the city a relationship-driven organization? Do you want to be? Why are you different? I've heard, you know, you say that you're different, but a declarative isn't a reality necessarily. But if you are different, how are you different? You know, one of the things that some of these organizations that you've mentioned do are rotational assignments. You've got, you know, non-management staff that honestly, like every organization, gets stale over time. Move them around. Create an environment of continuous learning and career growth. Keep it lively and exciting. And then the last point that I was trying to pick up on here, what is the cultural brand for city staff? Having, you know, I'm on the outside looking in most of the time. I don't see it. I'd love to see it. Don't see it right now. What do you want it to be, and how are you going to create it?
May I say a comment? One thing I was impressed with Shavela's, some of the other directors too, but they use those terms, and Shavela's jumped out to me because she was looking for really concrete ways to meet the service, to meet the needs of our users, the customers, those of our departments that serve customers directly. And she used that term pretty directly. I think the term she used in her write-up was a customer culture, just that, a customer culture. And so just recognizing some of the directors looking to implement that in the, in the departments, and using those terms as part of this exercise you had us undergo.
Since
Well,
you named her,
Michelle, you brought up a really good point, and that is, if we go back to the high level goals that we had when we put the strategic plan together, way back at the beginning, and what was the vision? And it was to be, for example, welcoming, that we were a hospitality city. So there was some voicing of what we wanted our city to feel like. See, I think a good vision and values statement is one that tells you, what do you see when you walk down the hall or walk down the street? What do you feel? What is it like? And I can tell you that when I have said the story a million times, when I came to College Park and my wife said, I'd like to come back here, I said, it's the friendliest place I have ever visited. There was a sense. I walk every day. People say hi to each other. That's a characteristic of our city. Now, what's the characteristic of our organization? Do people say hi to one another? Do they help each other out when they slip? I'm being oversimplified, but yeah.
The one thing, I can only speak from the convention center, but I feel like people have 5 or 6 different choices. And if they choose the convention center, I consider it an honor. So I want to give you a great experience there. I don't want anybody else in the city to have better customer service than we have at the GICC. We are there to serve. So once we decide who we are or what our culture is, then we have to, as department heads, we have to pass that culture on to our employees. We are here to serve. That's what we do. So I think that once we establish what our culture is, we've got to get the buy-in of our employees. So that, because the employees for the city, they don't stay for the money. I stay in College Park because I believe in it. I believe that this city is on the brink of greatness. There is something about knowing who your citizens are, knowing who your council is, being able to pick up the phone and there's just something special about College Park that you don't get in every other city. And I don't think we talk enough about our experience on the inside about College Park.
See, that's a communications thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Back to quantum for a second, because I'm not sure, and if the question was answered, my apologies. But does every department head feel comfortable using the software? Do we need to set up over the next couple of weeks? Like, do we say by September 15th, everyone should be using this, and we'll be setting up training sessions to make sure that everyone is comfortable in this software?
Mayor, that's part of the direction for the August 5th executive team meeting. Since we've recently resumed those expectations to go forward, we will be creating an environment for that to happen. Some are comfortable with it, some are not. Some are still more comfortable with the previous monthly reporting model. So that is part of the orientation.
Okay. So when can we expect everyone to be trained on it?
So as we conclude this discussion in a little while, I plan to reiterate about the September 8th workshop meeting. So in advance of that, we anticipate having the applicable follow-up training exercises so that we can be able to proceed during that time frame.
Terrence, and I can get the training done between now and the meeting in September.
Exactly, that's what I'm getting at.
I will meet with the department heads again to make sure everybody's comfortable.
And Michael, that will be part of this discussion for the August 5th executive team meeting. And again, I'll summarize that as we wrap up in a little while. So that is part of the package, Madam Mayor.
Great. And I think that we've got it. If some department heads are embracing it and some haven't yet, perhaps there's also an opportunity to kind of, from a communication standpoint, illustrate the importance of it as we evolve as an organization. Because I think that we've, in a lot of ways, what we do is the way that we've done things. And so if you add new technologies on top of what we've already done, the value isn't necessarily embraced. So again, I think it's just another opportunity for communications integration in that.
Yeah, and Madam Mayor, if I may, the quantum workplace software is great for collaboration and project management. But initially, your question was, how can we bring all of these department heads together? And as I mentioned before, COVID has changed how we communicate with each other, and we still have to have some lead that can pull the police, that can pull fire, that can pull IT. If we have another critical issue, I mean, I don't think all the departments know that the police might have a war room. I don't know if some of the departments know that, but there should be a place where we all can assemble, led by whomever, and everybody's on the same page. That's another issue I think we probably needs to address, because what if COVID takes a reverse and now we got to walk back all the things that we have in place and close the city down again?
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind that war room can be virtual.
It can be.
You can, and we probably should have structured communication lists that trigger Zoom meetings that we can be notified and pick up a link on our cell phone and join a meeting at a moment's notice. This is not a special called meeting. This is an emergency meeting.
It can be.
Yep.
I mean, let's say we have a chlorine gas leak on a freight car, a tanker car going through the city. We might want to be able to jump the council and the department heads and everybody on a Zoom meeting instantaneously or virtually instantaneously to figure out what the devil we're going to do.
Right.
Fulton County has a system that's similar to that. I mean, at the start of COVID, I was getting text messages saying, we're having a meeting in 15 minutes with everybody, like it was instantaneous that, you basically got that essentially emergency text, but they knew everyone that it needed to go to. And it included not only elected officials, but the schools, Department of Health. They've got that core team of people that they understand all need to be informed in the event of an emergency.
And we're behind the 8 ball. We need to be doing that now.
Yesterday.
Proximity to the airport, you got the trains coming through, you got COVID, you got, there's too many issues for us not to have something like this.
Well, that's why we have Code Red to alert the citizenry.
Right.
But that doesn't address our organizational needs.
I agree.
But Chief is on the line. We can take our phone numbers and dump them into Code Red and segregate just the department heads or city government to send out specific messages. Chief is on the line. He could talk about that a little more, but Code Red would allow you to do that. I mean,
Chief,
we have
Chief, he's putting you on the spot.
Okay, which chief? Chief
Elmore, I believe. Yes. You're trying to hand that off, right?
You can't duck that one.
Not this chief, the other chief.
But
That's
yes,
departments
that would
working
work.
together.
I think that would work. We could just designate all of you, mayor and council, city manager, probably finance, and Mike Hicks, and we could designate it just to send out messages to you all if it's an emergency. Yes.
We could also include all of our command staffs, Wade, if we need to.
That's correct. Yes.
I mean, we're probably talking about a fairly large group of people if we are going to be managing this right. It might be 30 people. Who?
Thereabouts.
Yeah.
Yep.
But if, for example, if we're closing down City Hall, all of us can get text messages or something on our phones that says leave the building at 1 o'clock.
Mm.
Yep.
Yeah, but
Technology is wonderful.
If you have an airplane go down, or if you have a train with a chemical spill and it closes down 85 and Roosevelt Highway and Camp Creek Parkway, we're going to have all hands on board and everybody know what's going on, because all the council is going to be getting calls, all the departments are going to be getting calls,
Right.
and we need to be responding, or getting together and looking and listening. So
I think normally that's what we try to do when we have events. I have all of you all in a group email, or I'll send out a group email to you all and city manager. But I think we could expand that.
Yeah, I think in that case, especially, you are really good about that, Chief. But we probably do need to widen the circle a little bit. Gerald should be involved with those conversations. If they're that big old fire week and a half ago. Yeah.
Well, I was worried about it at that time. When that thing burned, I was concerned of whether we were going to get noxious vapors that we'd have to evacuate some areas.
Yes.
And you were busy. I mean, Chief Elmore, you were busy doing your job, and then the email didn't go through. And so,
that's correct. But the good thing about it, like I said, Gerald was there. We did communicate with Atlanta Fulton County Emergency Management Agency, and they were able to send out the EPA and EPD that came out and tested the air quality and the chemical runoffs, and everything was fine after. But we got all the support we needed. But as Mayor stated, I was a little busy during that day. So, but I'm glad it did turn out. We didn't have any injuries or anything that night. So,
great job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't take issue, please understand that I do not take issue with your email not going through when you're fighting a fire. But we should have structures in place where if you say if we have an emergency manager, you make one call and you say, this is what we're dealing with, activate the team.
Yes.
So then it's not your responsibility to do both of those things.
Yes.
We did have an emergency management position at one time, and we cut that position.
Yes, that position was very important. And I know over the last few years, I know Mike Hicks and I and Mercedes, we've all talked about it, trying to get that position back. But it's very important, and especially with all the hazards we have here in the city and right there by the airport, it's very important.
I mean, just 2020, I feel like, is one big emergency management.
Yes. Yes, it is.
And I think it probably highlights the reason why we may need to take a second look at that.
Okay.
All right.
We shot our wad?
Oh, goodness, no. There's plenty more to talk about. So in terms of cross-cutting issues, one is just to review the bidding. One is internal communications and 6 teams. I've tinkered with them a little bit. You all can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we have a communications team, an information technology team, what I'm calling a human assets team. I like that better than human resources. Kind of feels warmer. Could be even human relationships. Public safety and emergency preparedness, municipal finance planning and procurement, and then commerce development and land use, all cross-cutting teams. We talked about how to incentivize teaming in a matrix structure and the use of quantum in concert with a human resources and evaluation and compensation system. We talked about room for improvement in human resources, particularly in regard to acculturation and in regard to electronic communications using, again, quantum. I listed 7 different bullet points for how you might create a customer service culture and a brand for the city staff. I love the observation that we are a hospitality city. and noted there in a facetious way, but true. Doesn't that make sense given that we are here right adjacent to the airport? Who else is positioned to be a hospitality city, right? But keeping it lively and exciting, not only for our residents, but our staff as well. I think it was Michelle who mentioned Shavela in a different context, but if she's listening, she'll be embarrassed, I'm sure. You know, what a wonderful success story she is in having experienced so many departments within city government and risen to the title of county clerk. Don't we want everybody to come in with that kind of thirst and hunger and chance to shine and realize success? That's the culture. She's the personification of the culture you want in municipal government. Sorry, Shavela, if I've embarrassed you, but it's a tremendous story.
I'm not embarrassed. Thank you, though.
Welcome. I was blown away. Even as I started talking, I was blown away. I was like, that was awesome. The highlight of all my interviews. We talked about bridging to the citizenry as a cross-cutting issue and connecting people to place and to city government, not only in terms of departments and services, but as individuals. And then lastly, we talked about emergency preparedness and needing to better structure communications, whether that's through triggering Zoom meetings in an emergency or cell phone messaging or some other way. But clearly work needs to be done in those areas. Fantastic discussion, and one that I'm proud to have introduced, but even prouder to have heard as a city resident. So thank you for all of the conversation thus far. Is there a fifth and a sixth cross-cutting issue, or is 4 where you want to be?
The only thing that I can think of is, you know, how do our department heads feel, you know, about this? How do they embrace it? Is there something that we're missing, which I'm sure there is? Is there something that should be left out? I mean, you know, we need, as far as citizenry, we also need our department heads to, you know, to tell us as well. That's the only thing that I see. I thought you did a great job.
Well, thank you. But let's tee it up. We got a bunch of them here. I can see names. I can't see faces, but Chief Elmore's here, Althea's here, Loretta's here, Michelle's here. Clearly Shavela's here. What do y'all think?
If I may, before you go to that place. So one of the purposes of the executive team meeting this coming Wednesday is to help accomplish exactly that, so that we can prepare for the respective workshop meeting we committed earlier. And you and I will talk a little bit about that in a few moments as we get to that place. Otherwise, we are in position to entertain any specifics that may be available at this time. But again, we'll get more detailed about it as we visit on the 5th.
Maybe, let me just throw out one idea, Adam. And maybe it's not for this meeting, it might be for Terrence's executive team meeting. But what are the barriers? I mean, it's a lot easier for the department heads to voice, if they're willing to voice, feel comfortable voicing. What are the barriers to some of these things that they see? You know, what's keeping these things from happening? Why haven't they naturally happened, for example? And I can think of lots of reasons that they wouldn't necessarily have to coalesce, but still, why don't people use quantum? I'd love to hear it. I don't need to hear it here, but I would love to have it discussed anyhow, openly, candidly, without any concern about reprisals or hurting somebody's feelings. What do we need to do differently? And I know there are some things that are stock, simple answers. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough time. We've got way too much on our plate. Certainly true. I can tell you, I've been there. I've had that same situation in industry. But okay, yeah, we all have that problem. But usually there's a more fundamental psychological problem than just that you're not engaging with whatever the mechanism is that we're trying to get engaged. And I don't know that that's a subject for this discussion. It might be a better discussion for the executive. team meeting.
Let's tee it up and see if somebody wants to jump in. Let's not label it as a psychological barrier or psychological anything, although I know what you meant. What are the barriers and what would get in the way of us dealing with the cross-cutting issues? This is a conversation for those department heads who are here if they want to jump in. This is a safe space. What do you think?
Okay, you know I'm always going to speak.
Mercedes, I know I could count on you.
I don't want to have to do both. If I'm going to do month end the paper way, I don't want to have to do part of getting the Quantum Workplace was I said, okay, I'll use it, but I'm not going to do both because that's just adding something to my plate.
Right.
So if everybody is in agreement that that's how we're going to do it, I have no problem. I just don't want to do double work.
Good one. What other barriers exist out there?
I know I'm a newbie. The quantum for me, I think was, as a new person, Mike walked me through it. It's really, I think, a great tool to show progress tied to our strategic plans, which Mike Hicks walked me through, and do updates daily, weekly, monthly. So I think the program is great. I think it's just going to take a little time for everybody to get implemented on it.
Okay, barriers out there. What do you got? Why isn't collaboration happening? Why are the silos as significant as they are? Despite the fact that if you look at that performance standards document, I got to tell you, everybody's codependent on somebody else.
Well, let me throw out one thing. Are all the department directors, do they feel comfortable using quantum? I'm talking about technically comfortable. It took me a while to learn to write on an electronic pad with my pencil.
I think it would be, I think it's less about the tool itself than how it's used and are we going to use it. And I think the collaboration is a separate question from the tool. Quantum is a tool, and I'm excited to start using it more. But it's really a matter of how is it used for that collaboration. It's going to be more structures and processes that will help the coordination. So when we have projects, I think there's the sense that each department head will just do what they need to do, reach out to whom they need to, but there isn't really a person assigned to be in charge. So it's tough to make demands from your counterparts when you have no authority over them. So sometimes it's a little awkward. But I'm kind of new, I've only been a year. So I think having structures and processes, those sort of things will help. And those things, if they're written out, then we can institutionalize. Like I wasn't aware we had, a monthly meeting, for example, kind of had to just find that out about development committees. Sort of these things that if we institutionalize and then you share them, then we can figure it out and strengthen them. And one example was Loretta and Oscar and I and already met. We just met because it had been a little while and we just wanted to coordinate about all our projects, but we don't have that institutionalized. We don't have a list of all our development projects that we can easily get out of a system. So that's where, so there's that collaboration where we meet, but then who's in charge to, push through to make some of these operational improvements, someone, to assign or self-select gets a little awkward if you're not in a position, you're not the authority to do so.
And Michelle, just to clarify, that is a role and function of development committee meeting, which takes place every second Thursday of the month, precisely as what you talked about, and that's been in place for some time. So you are likewise a valuable member of that process.
I can throw out what we did in industry, and that was we had hats. And so you might be the head of a managerial area. You might be a manager of, say, hardware design, but you also had several other hats that you were the one who coordinated amongst 5 or 6 other people on a particular issue that crossed organizational boundaries. And so everybody got to wear a hat. And nobody was the person that was always in charge. It depended on your expertise, how much of the job you already had in your department, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody got to wear hats, multiple hats. And if you didn't take direction from the person who was wearing the other hat, they're not going to take direction from you when you got to execute your hat.
This is Loretta Washington. I need to echo what Michelle said about quantum, and I'm still new too, so I have no idea what quantum is. And I know I need to get the training. I know one time Mike Pitts sent an email saying that we needed to enter our strategic goals into quantum, and I realized that I'd given them to Adam, but I knew I hadn't put them in quantum, so I really need that training. And another big issue for me is we need some type of online or in-house permitting system, even if it's a small system. I feel like I'm sort of losing it, and I know because of COVID, I haven't been really oriented yet, and I'm not too concerned about it. I'm just trying to, tackle everything, but it's a lot.
So, Michelle, this is, I'm sorry, Loretta, this is Mike Hicks. So I will contact you again, and then you and I can get together, get the quantum piece knocked out.
Yes.
Yeah, the other thing I want to mention is I met with Oscar and his team to look at how they do business. Can people do business with him online? Do they have the availability for you to, if you want a permit, if you need something from the department? So I met with Oscar, and so I think my next step is to meet with you, Oscar, Michelle. I think we all need to get together, and
yes,
I think we can get this thing figured out and bring it back to towns with a price tag.
Well, Oscar mentioned you all had discussed the software for $300,000, and that, we know we may not need something like that. That's a bit much, but we can develop something in-house.
No, I never said $300,000. No, that's a scary number. No,
Watch out your mouth, somebody.
No, I think you may have misinterpreted that. There's no software out there I would purchase for $300,000. Okay. But again, let's you and I and Michelle and Oscar get together, and let's do some decision trees and see how these things flow together. Then I'll bring it back to chance with a price tag.
Okay, thank you.
It also may be a good idea that when department heads are onboarded, that they spend time in each department, because I think they get onboarded and they sit at their desk. So they have to kind of stumble into why they need another department instead of spending time with each department head and kind of knowing what they do.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, everything you just talked about, Mercedes, Loretta, Michael, and Michelle, are very pertinent discussions for our exercise coming up on August 5th as we prepare the how to implement dialogue in preparation for the September workshop meeting as noted. And I'll have some thoughts and comments and overall direction about that momentarily.
Yeah, I think
all of that is applicable. I just wanted to offer my endorsement to that effect and to ask you all to be prepared at Wednesday's meeting as noted.
Yeah.
Question. I'm hearing that permitting needs to be online. If there were 5 things, I feel slightly like Adam here, but if there's 5 things that we need to make sure are available online, permitting being one of them, that we don't have today. Business licenses. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 I hear all the time, permitting and business.
Parks and Rec. I think Michelle had some online registration goals.
Right.
For PD, especially in this pandemic, and kind of get a feel for the last pandemic we have to deal with.
Yeah, that's my number 1 goal is online everything.
I would like to see software for online incident reporting for crimes that don't need immediate response. Like to be able for a victim to pull up, say a victim leaves town and goes to their home state or wherever, they realize something was stolen or taken from on their trip, they need to file a report. They can just get online through our city site and file the report and answer the questionnaires.
So guys,
And similar to that, I would probably code enforcement seems like, I know a lot of us get different phone calls from code enforcement. And that would be a real cost efficiency and really a customer response if we could get online. But I do see there were 4 or 5 different departments mentioning this need, but the ones that'll make it happen are communications and IT, I think. So if this is a priority, then their 2 performance standards or whatever their priorities, if that's a priority, that needs to be the biggest shift. It sounds like the original question was, what has COVID changed? And it's just magnified that we have to make that a priority. So I don't think it was under the first round of Adam's efforts.
Well, our new system should allow us to handle some of this, right, Mr. Hicks?
Yes, and also we have Laserfish that can do a lot of this if we buy the enterprise package. It could knock out 99% of everything that's listed here.
What about paying online for permits?
Yes, we can look at that. Shabela and I, we met with the Laserfish rep, and a lot of these things we just didn't have the money to pay for them.
Does New World have any of this capability, or would we have to do something? We'd have to do Laserfish instead of New World, or
we can merge with New World, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Hicks, right?
I'm sorry, Shabela.
We can merge with Laserfish, New World on a lot of the things that that we currently are doing, so we won't have to change New World, but it's almost like an extension of it.
Yeah. In other words, they have an application interface that we can merge Laserfish with New World, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel or try to forklift the software we currently have. I mean, Laserfish is a very powerful tool. We're just not using the enterprise package.
What is Laserfish, basically? That's the first time I've heard that term.
Laserfish. Shavela, you want me to pass the baton to you? City Clerk.
Shavela.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I'm saying, Councilman Clay asked, what is Laserfish?
Laserfish is the software that we use to manage our record. So every contract, every set of minutes, anything that the city has is scanned into Laserfish, and it has that is it the QR code where you can read or type in whatever you're looking for and put it up that way, so we won't have to go to paper whenever we need records. We use it a lot for our open record software. We can just pull one file over and drag it into the Just FOIA portal instead of scanning things in. We can just have it online. Everything's digital.
Does it have a workflow management component with it that you can route documents amongst people and track sign off and what have you?
If it does, I'm not aware of that, but I'm pretty sure we can get an answer to that.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does. Yes.
Okay.
You know, I would recommend we bring the guy back and do an enterprise demo, and 99% of these things could be conquered through that software.
I do know it allows it to be web-based, so you can access it from anywhere.
I'll volunteer to sit in on that meeting, because I've had some experience in industry with some of that stuff.
And if you can get it on, I'll sit in on it too. And if it makes sense to someone like me who doesn't have that experience, then it will make sense to everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, we had a lunch and learn right before COVID, and it was really good. So I feel like it's something that we definitely can benefit from. It was just the money to get it up and running. That was the issue.
How are we, and now, okay, so Laserfish looks like a great opportunity. But obviously in this environment, our finances are extremely limited. So do we know that we are getting the most out of what we already pay for? That we need extra things?
Was that a question for me or Shavela?
You know, it was anyone who wanted to tackle it.
Well, no, in terms of workflow, we're not getting what we could out of the current software package that we have, the version of Laserfish that we have, because all departments can set up workflows, they can set up folders, you can scan from your multifunctional printer right into Laserfish into a file. So, but in terms of getting what we need in terms of collaboration and online payment and more efficiency for our staff and our customers' use, we're not getting that because we don't have the right package.
Well, but what I'm saying is, I mean, like we've talked about at least 3 different software programs tonight. Laserfish, New World, Quantum. I know they do different things, but are we using what we're paying for before we pay for more?
We use Laserfish daily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, is we the clerk's office and are other departments using it as well?
I know we use it, and I want to say PD uses it, but I'm not sure who else.
Fire department uses it also.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So are there opportunities for other departments to use Laserfish that we haven't
Yes.
tapped into? All right. So I think that's that. I mean, I think a conversation about the tools that we have and is everyone using them to their fullest potential is one that needs to occur. For instance, so our new executive assistant, has she been trained on Laserfish? Is it something that she needs to know?
I would say no.
I'm sorry. I asked 2 questions. So
Okay.
the no was response to what?
I would say she does not need to be trained on Laserfish because we kind of handle the documents for mayor and council's office. Anything that you guys have, we should have scanned into Laserfish.
Okay.
Are there other items that or other programs that we can eliminate if we bring these on board and thus save a little money? I guess that would be something we would find out later on, Michael, or whatever. If we bring this on, we can do away with this one program and, save some money. And
exactly, Councilman Allen. That would be part of the deliberative engagement process associated therein. So creating efficiencies in operations to that effect wherever possible, which is also a specific function and task of the Budget Optimization Committee that I recently provided you our report on. The fact that it is now active, it will be taken under consideration, those types of opportunities. So yes, sir.
All right.
I think this is a great meeting.
Well, that has everything to do with all of you and what you've brought to the table tonight. It was not the meeting anybody intended, but it was very necessary. Okay, so my observations and then suggestions for next steps, and then everybody can go grab dinner.
And I'd like to offer a few conclusion remarks as well after you're done, Adam.
You want to do that before or after me? Up to you.
After you.
All right. Which means I may be overruled in this, which is absolutely fine because all I'm doing is trying to listen, and I'm sure I captured things partially correctly, but partially incorrectly. First, good work. This was a lot of fun to listen to. I honestly wish everyone in the city had an eye on this process and the people in it. It would give every resident great confidence in your abilities to work collaboratively and to move things forward. Yet the other side of that is that there is a lot of work to do. I see 4 things that need a crosswalk and alignment. The strategic plan, I gotta tell you, I haven't said it so far because it didn't feel right to say that somebody else's work needs work, but this needs work. It doesn't reflect a lot of what you've said here, and where it does, it's in really generic, high-level terms. It needs a good look in the context of organizational design, and in that vein, there probably needs to be a good look at city functions clear missions for each department, the institutionalization of teams, and incentives for teaming. The third piece that needs to be a part of this crosswalk and alignment is the performance standards work that we've been working so hard on through the first half of this year, with an eye toward HR and compensation. HR meaning evaluations and compensation. And then lastly, a bit of a tactical plan. I haven't seen that yet. It should come out of performance standards and everyone's commitment to achieving the goals that they've set out. The new twist here in the last 5 or 10 minutes is a look at the need for a look at technology and to see if it's being maximized and if the combination of technologies is being optimized. Mike, I'm looking at you there, obviously. What I seem to be capturing as next steps, there is a meeting that Terrence is leading on the 5th of August. There is another meeting to follow on September 2nd. One or both may be helpful in achieving some of what I've laid out above. I do think, as I said, there's a need to revise the strategic plan, not a heavy lift, but to put it in terms that make sense as a strategic plan. Clearly the need to finalize performance standards, the institutionalization of teams, and honestly, the development of a technology assessment. Again, because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it hasn't been done, but it sounds to me like there is a crying need. There are cross-cutting issues that need to weave their way throughout these processes, including internal communications, external communications, the entirety of the human resource picture, culturally and for individuals. The idea of emergency preparedness and really tying that down a good bit, where there still seem to be some questions. Again, just to recap the recap, an August 5th meeting, a September meeting, and lots of alignment that needs to be attacked between the strategic plan, organizational design, performance standards, and the tactical plan. With that, I think that's what I've tried to capture throughout these notes. Terrence, I'll polish these a little bit, but really just hand them off to you as a resource for moving forward in the activities that you see on the horizon. Here's the baton. It's yours. Take it. Run.
Okay, thank you, Adam. And I'll be fairly brief. So on this note, Adam, I'm asking you to make some scheduling commitments, if you will, right here, live and virtually in front of everyone. So the August 5th executive team meeting, so we typically meet beginning at 9 o'clock, which we will in this case. However, by the time we convene at 10, that portion of the meeting will be dedicated to the subject, City Council strategic goals, objectives, and priorities, considerations as to how to implement. I think we should continue with that theme, because essentially what council initiated this afternoon or this evening was goals, objectives, and priorities, some specific performance expectations, measurements, indicators, etc. So the purpose of the 10 o'clock dialogue on August 5th, of which I'm asking you to be a part of that, is to essentially begin the process of not only tying it together, but to also work with department directors to think of ways to implement a how piece, as the mayor iterated in her comments a little earlier. So the meeting in September, it's not September 2nd, for clarification, it will be Tuesday, September 8th at 6 o'clock. And mayor and city council members, the direction will be to have the workshop meeting devoted solely for this purpose. And we'll go with the same title, City Council Strategic Goals, Objectives, and Priorities, Considerations as to how to implement. And much of that will be a function of the exercise having been achieved this evening, in addition to what we will accomplish as an executive team beginning with the August 5th meeting. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to be permitted to proceed in that regard, and we'll be able to continue moving forward. Part of the August 5th executive team meeting will also address the quantum workplace piece. Again, this is a directive that just became available earlier this year. So I wish for everybody to please understand it's a fairly new step in the right direction in terms of reporting. Again, the Office of the City Manager, speaking in second person, utilizes quantum workplace in terms of reviewing information having been submitted contained therein. So for that reason, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's been a very productive process, but like the rest of the world, we've been adversely impacted due to the current state of affairs, but nevertheless, we continue to make this vision and direction across the board a priority. And thankfully and proudly, Mayor and City Council is offering their intricate thoughts, concerns, observations as part of it, which is why we are here today. So August 5th, Adam, 10 o'clock in the morning, please be with us virtually. We'll establish a link. This will be that agenda item for that purpose. And September 8th, Tuesday, September 8th at 6 o'clock, the sole purpose of that workshop meeting will be to proceed as outlined, by some initial considerations will be made available as to how we make respective strategic goals, objectives, and priorities happen. So with that, Madam Mayor, I yield, and thank you.
Had a little trouble getting my mouse to the unmute button. Anybody else have anything to add at this point?
I think it was a good meeting.
I think so too. I think we had some stuff to discuss. Are there any big overarching things that we're missing? I mean, for those folks on the phone who haven't said anything, I mean, are we just, I don't think any of us profess to know all the intricacies of every single department. So is there something else that belongs on the list that we've forgotten at this point?
The only thing that Adam highlighted it and made it all caps, but when I put on my management hat when I was there at Delta, the thing that you get concerned is the same thing Mercedes says, you know, it takes a lot of time. You don't mind doing it, but you want everybody doing it. How much time is it going to take? Is it going to be 2 hours every week, or is it going to be 10 minutes every week? You know, how much of my time is going to be devoted to doing this all the time? So that's my only thing.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone and appreciate your commitment to this process and your participation in the discussion. And with that, at 8:08, I will adjourn this meeting. Have a great evening.
Good job, everybody.
Good night, all.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good night. Take care.
Stay healthy.